The British economy just saw its biggest contraction in 16 years. Both stocks in London and the British pound are suffering. Charles Hudson following it all in London. Charles, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
Hi.
Hi. What did we see in terms of equity reaction to the news?
Well, in fact, this was not as bad as it could have been. If you consider that the Japanese market was off by about 9.6% and the FTSE closed with a loss of a little bit more than 5%, having been off by as much as 7 or 8%, then clearly there was a little bit of steadying of the market following the New York Open. It sounds perverse, but clearly there was not the kind of reaction that we had expected on the Dow. So we did see the European indices come back a little bit. But I think what we're now focusing on in the markets is very much the bad news, the fact that we're looking at one of the longest, or potentially one of the deepest slowdowns we've seen for a generation or so. And people are simply looking at the fact that earnings are bad, guidance from companies is bad, and they are selling stocks. So we saw, you know, the European markets broadly off by 4 or 5% as a result of that. Poppy.
You know, we've also seen, Charles, a real focus on currency, especially this week with the British pound taking a beating against the greenback. The yen really the only standout in terms of moving to the upside. What do you think, how big of a role does that play in with this? The pound near $1.50 now.
Yeah, I think it's clearly there's a perception that Britain is not a good place to have your money. Neither is Europe. One of the interesting trends that we're seeing is the fact that people are going to these safe haven currencies like the yen. If you look at the yen against the dollar, that is very strong. That's the highest that it's been for some very considerable time. But equally, one of the assets that people are buying at the moment are US Treasury bonds. Now, that's quite good for Henry Paulson as he tries to sell those to finance the bank's bailout plan. But it just shows that there is this flight to safety, and the rest of us essentially are worried. You know, we could be near capitulation, but nobody, I think, it would be a courageous person to say we're near the bottom of these markets. Poppy.
Calling a bottom is incredibly tough these days. Finally, Charles, the economic crisis really now on a global scale, the UK in focus. It was just the US for quite a long time that was getting the worst of it, a lot of people said. You've been covering the UK markets for quite some time. Is this the worst you've seen in quite a while?
Well, certainly, I actually go back in my reporting career all the way back to 1987. But I think what is different between that crisis 21 years ago and the one that we're seeing at the moment is the fact that we just seem to get the markets getting clobbered day after day, session after session. I think we're uncharted territory. One of the things that has been depressing people over here is the fact that Charlie Bean, who's the Deputy Governor of the Bank of England over here, has been talking about a once-in-a-lifetime crisis. And I think when people use that kind of language, it is very, very worrying to investors.
That's what we heard Alan Greenspan say, the former Fed chief in the U.S., saying once in a century crisis, tsunami even, he's calling it. All right, Charles, appreciate your insight from London. Thank you.